I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council, and we thought this was going to be the last council meeting of the year, but we're actually going to have a special meeting Thursday afternoon to discuss CARES Act funding. But at the penultimate meeting, first I want to say that last Saturday, City Council took turns from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. at a couple of locations in central Plano, ringing the bell for the Salvation Army. Combined, we raised about $6,800, both through online fundraisers and in the kettles, ringing the bell. And we had a little friendly competition amongst council. I did not rig it this way, even though I organized it. I ended up winning, but I can't claim credit because toward the end of my shift, a friend stopped by and turned out, I didn't even know it at the time, contributed a very large sum. So many thanks to John and Denise Stuffelbeam for their generous contribution, which put me over the top to win this friendly competition. But the real winners, of course, are those whom the Salvation Army helps. Moving into the preliminary open meeting tonight, we heard the DART report. So in the first month of FY21, that's October 1st through 31st, for 1 month in Plano, we saw 35,000 bus rides. A ride is every time a person gets on. That's a lot less for the bus than in Garland, Richardson, and Irving. Obviously, Dallas is going to have more. We had 50,000 light rail rides. Again, that's every time somebody steps on. That is a lot more than in those other areas, Garland, Richardson, and Irving. We have a lot more ridership for the light rail in Plano. And 2,300 GoLink rides, that's primarily in West Plano, which is very different. That's way, way more than anywhere else, primarily because we're set up specifically for GoLink, and it's more conducive in Plano than at other places currently. We then had a review of the proposed bond referendum projects. Last time we reviewed Parks and Recreation, this time we reviewed facilities. There's a total of $44.1 million in proposed bond funding for facilities. Going down the list, we've got $9 million for renovation of Fire Station number 5, $12 million for renovation of Fire Station number 8, $5 million for parking canopies. This was something I asked a question about. What precipitated this, what was given in the justification, was that 3 years ago in 2017, we incurred, I think it was $1.8 million worth of hail damage in a hailstorm. So why are we spending $5 million to prevent 1.8 million 3 years ago, or call it every 3 years? And it's not entirely a financial matter. It turns out that a number of vehicles, I'm trying to find out the number of this, they're gonna get back to me, the actual proportion of vehicles that were damaged had their windshields damaged. So when it comes to public safety vehicles, you know, a squad car could ride around with some hail damage, but if the windshield is damaged, that is a functional disability for that vehicle, which puts it out of service because it's not safe for public safety. So pending the response to that, that would actually be a pretty valid reason to invest in the parking canopies to make sure that we had sufficient amount of the fleet that remained usable after a severe weather event. Next is fueling stations. It's a fueling station at $6.2 million. The idea is that the run on fuel after Hurricane Harvey put us in a bit of a shortage. And if there were such an event that happened again, we want to make sure that we have sufficient reserves and are able to fuel at least our public safety vehicles and those supporting public safety. So I did ask whether we might more efficiently and viably stockpile just actual fuel rather than building a whole filling station, or partner with a local fuel provider to just guarantee us some reserves in event of such a disaster. So we'll check on that and we'll see what they come back with. $3.5 million for various roof replacements, $5.5 million for council chamber renovations. Mayor Harry joked that most of that was going to go toward Mayor Pro Tem Prince's seat for the throne that she's going to get on the dais. But actually it's going toward Americans with Disability Act updates. This council chamber was built before the ADA, so it requires some updates. There's an acoustic problem here that you might be able to hear through this video, and an update of the audio system. That totals $5.5 million. and we're going to get lazy boys around the council dais. I'm joking, not really. $2 million for various renovations and repairs around the city. $190,000 for the Schimmelpfennig parking lot replacement. They showed some pictures. It's in pretty sad shape. $460,000 for fire station doors and floor replacement. $475,000 for locker room and restroom renovation. $500,000 for a Haggard Library window replacements on the north side. $300,000 for the Robinson Justice Center elevator jack. Issues with the elevator. It's jacked. Have a good night.
Have a good night, Shelby.
Various LED parking lamps and poles replacement for $430,000, and feasibility studies for future projects totaling $500,000. I'm gonna have to dig in and see what all that entails. Then we move to our regular meeting. Several people spoke in the comments of public interest about Montessori Children's House. The city attorney, this has been an ongoing litigation for 5 years, I think it was, well before my time on council. And the city attorney raised an interesting prospect of the council, if it so agrees, waiving attorney-client privilege to disclose details of prior offers and how this has gone in public meeting. Part of the challenge is that a lot has gone on in executive session because it involves litigation. The Texas Open Meetings Act provides for specific reasons where it's legitimate to go into executive session away from the public eye. Pending litigation involving the city is one of those reasons. And so since this has been such an ongoing issue, we discuss all this in executive session, so I know what's going on, but I can't share it with anybody. So when people are coming to me with frustrations, why is this happening? Why is that happening? I can't really say anything. So if the council were to waive that attorney-client privilege and air all this in the open, I think that would cut through a lot of the clutter. Next, we discussed the sale of 2.4 acres of land to the city just north of 15th Street between M and N Avenue. This is the vacant land just on the other side of 15th from the old First Baptist Church. The nearest parks are Haggard and at Mendenhall Elementary, both of which are about a third of a mile away. The city would lease back the land until the new church is complete, the new First Baptist Church is complete. Would that be the Second Baptist Church? I digress. The proposed sale price was about 1.8 million. The last appraisal came in at 1.5 million. So we were looking at a sale price of $17.50 per square foot. We discussed tabling this item pending an update of the appraisal, which was estimated to cost between $1,000 and $3,000. But it didn't look like it was getting enough support for tabling. So we ultimately made the motion to deny. The denial passed 5-2. So that was denied. The city is not going to purchase that land for that purchase price. It's entirely possible that negotiations could start over again and a new offer could be made. We'll have to see. There was a consent agenda item that was actually tied with that developer in Town Homes. So that was put on the regular agenda, and then that did not pass 5-2 because it was same vote, because it was all tied up together with the same property and the same developer. Moving on to the renovation of Oak Point Park outdoor pool for a price tag of the princely sum of $9.4 million. Now, this amount was approved by voters in 2017 in the bond referendum for the pool, and it was approved by us for the CIP budget for this year, earlier. So this is going to completely renovate the outdoor pool at Oak Point Center and put in a double-ended wave pool with some additional play features. That passed 7-0. Councilmember Grady was out tonight, as I requested last week in my video recap. I don't know how much of this is public, but please pray for Councilmember Grady and his family. Third, we adopted standards of care for the Parks and Recreation classes. What this does is Parks and Rec classes under state statute are considered a daycare. but there's an exemption for municipalities that offer these programs so that we don't actually have to apply for daycare licensing. So by showing that we have specific standards of care for these programs and these classes and formally adopting them through council, we are able to request a waiver of the licensing requirement. That passed 7-0 because we offer outstanding care. Then we moved on to zoning request, which was essentially just swapping out a daycare specific use permit, SUP, for a private school SUP. Now, much like the Archgate Montessori case of last year that caused so much contention, this had also been operating as a private school since 2012 for the past 8 years. However, it was classified as a parochial school. This is for Coram Deo Christian Academy. So it had been classified as a parochial school back then and did not require an SUP. Things have changed since then, and so under new requirements, they were interacting with the city, and the city told them, well, you need an SUP for this now. So they applied for the SUP. They're already in operation. They basically just got the SUP to formalize what they're already doing. So that passed 7-0 as well. Then we got to probably the lengthiest item tonight, but I'll skip to the punchline. It passed 7-0. This was the rezoning for the Plano Market Square Mall, the antique mall. This is off of K Avenue and Spring Creek Parkway. It was the Plano Market Square Mall is, there's no other way to put it, is blighted. For most of my time in Plano, my wife and I, we lived right around the corner from there. We've been in that property several times, and it is in dire need of renovation and revitalization. So the proposed, or passed, I'll say, because I skipped to the punchline already, the past zoning request was for office, a little bit of retail, and some multifamily. There's also a row of townhomes, so it would otherwise be considered single family attached. However, they're renting those townhomes, so it qualifies as multifamily. 325 total units across the entire property, which is 28 acres. For the residential portion of it, it comes out to, I think it was like 13.5 units per acre, somewhere around there. Maybe it was 17, in the teens. And maximum of 3 stories, so all the buildings of all sorts, office, retail, and multifamily are gonna be between 1 and 3 stories. There were 17 indications of support and 0 in opposition. I made the motion to approve this because, and as I stated, my hope is that even though it's not the same scope and scale as the Collin Creek development, I'm hoping that the Collin Creek development and this Plano Market Square Mall update can serve as bookends for the revitalization of the 75 corridor. Now, as I also stated, we have a density issue in Plano, and we have a comparatively extremely high proportion of multifamily housing in the city. So I've said consistently, ever since I started campaigning, that if we're to add additional multifamily, it needs to make a whole lot of sense for that area. And I very much believe this does for this area. And props to the developer for conceiving a great project. It's comparatively, it's only moderately dense. They're not trying to take advantage or go gung-ho. It really is a great project. And that passed 7-0, obviously. Then we moved on to the second public hearing for the bond referendum, which is scheduled to take place next May 1st in the municipal elections. The next public hearing will be on January 11th, so you can tune in for that. The current total of proposed projects is $404 million. Now, in the absence of any other adjustments, the current forecast is that to be tax neutral, meaning require no tax increases. Of course, if all the bonds were denied, then your taxes would go down. But to avoid a tax increase, our break-even point is currently $136 million. That's about a third of the entire proposed package. So we're really going to have to strike a balance between what needs to be done and what kind of tax burden are the people willing to bear. So I want to be perfectly clear, whatever council authorizes to be put on the bond referendum, that will be one set of expenses, but the taxpayers have to vote on it. Now, any bond is paid 100% by the taxpayers. Whatever happens to your actual tax rate or the amount of taxes you're paying in any given year, you're still on the hook for the entire thing. So we have to determine, and you have to determine, whether those expenses are worth it. The reality is that our city was built out in bursts 2-3 decades ago. And a lot of it, the lion's share, like 3/5 of the whole thing is just streets of that $404 million, just streets. So a lot of our streets have a lifespan of 30 years, and guess what? It's been about 30 years, and you can tell when you're driving on some of those roads. So as I like to say, our warranty's up. So that's what's at stake, and I've got an article in my blog, just search up bond referendum, and you can read what I wrote about the bond process, how municipal bonds work, and the purpose they serve. We then moved on to the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, which is required that we show what we're doing with HUD money. A couple of highlights, 24 homeowners were helped with housing rehabilitation, and 440 people were helped with homelessness prevention. A big chunk of that is because of what happened in 2020, and the needs of many were elevated more than ever before. And so we did reshuffle some money earlier in the year to enable greater help to those in need because they weren't able to pay their rent or their mortgage. So that's all for tonight. Thank you for tuning in. Thursday at 5 o'clock, we're going to have the special city council meeting regarding the the CARES Act funding through Call and Cares. Thank you, and even though I'm going to do a recap after that, I still wish you a very Merry Christmas.